getting through Hell Week requires a tremendous amount of mental fortitude and toughness, and I was able to do that. And at that very exact same point in life, still could not throw a ball due to the yips. So if I proved that I was extremely mentally tough and at the same time couldn't throw a ball due to the yips, then it follows that the yips cannot be due to a lack of mental toughness.
Jason, the first time I came across your name was when a colleague of mine, Robbie Vogel, asked Lucas Glover earlier this year sort of how he had solved his putting yips. And he had mentioned that he had come across a Navy SEAL, yourself, and he had, that SEAL had sort of transformed the way that he thought about the problem he was having. Before I get to how you solve the problem, I understand that the only reason that you are able to solve that problem is because you went through it yourself. So tell me about your experience with the Y word.
Yeah, I was playing baseball in college at Middle Tennessee State coming into my senior season. I was not a high round, a very well-known guy. I wasn't going to be a high round draft pick or anything like that, but I was starting to come into myself. I was throwing the ball a lot harder, a lot more consistently, putting together at times some dominant performance. If I could string together the consistency, my shot at playing professional baseball was very realistic. We had won our conference the year before. We had a top 25 ranking as a mid-major school in the Sun Belt, and everything was in alignment. I was going to play a lot, played a lot the year before as a vital pitcher coming out of the bullpen, pitched in high leverage situations, closed games, and in my senior season, I came out to throw in an inter squad. And that's what's interesting is there was really no elevated pressure or anything here. And if anything, it was reduced. Just throwing against my teammates. And I walked the bases loaded, maybe a run or two in. I can't remember exactly how many batters I faced. It was at least 3. And I didn't throw a single strike. And I threw a lot of strikes. I wasn't missing the catcher, but I didn't throw a single ball over the plate. The next day I was playing catch and went out and as just normal getting warmed up and loose, and about every 5th or 6th throw, I would sail one about 8 or 9 feet over his head. Nothing felt different in my delivery. Nothing felt animated or anxious going out there that day. It was just like every so often the ball would go wildly off target. That compounded upon itself. I tried to fight through it throughout the whole season, culminated in throwing 6 wild pitches in an inning. I believe it's the most anyone ever has in the NCAA. That was back in 2001, and that was the last competitive game of baseball I ever played. I didn't walk away and quit. I kept showing up and tried to throw, but I never got it back.
What did you think at the time was the sort of root cause?
I had no idea. I had never heard of the term yips until years later. But I knew it wasn't due to mental weakness. I didn't feel like I was mentally weak. And I think some people thought it's, well, you can't handle the situation. I had LASIK eye surgery. I had rolled my ankle and things like that. So some guys were contributed to that. Well, your depth perception off, your mechanics are messed up because of your ankle or whatever. But I knew there was something else going on. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't think it was because I couldn't handle the pressure and was cracking in it. But I also just had no idea what was happening. And at the time, I didn't realize there was a mechanical interruption taking place because it felt like it was coming out of my hand clean, just way off. So I thought my release point was just way over here or way over there for whatever reason. Later on, as I examined myself, and this is before we had cameras like we have them now, with VHS and stuff. But my dad came out to a practice, and I threw a pickoff move, missed the first baseman by probably 10 feet, two-hopped it. And he said, your hand's wrapping around the side of the ball. And that was the first time I realized, okay, there's something that's manifesting itself in my mechanics, and I'm not even recognizing it, So I really just didn't know, and it wore out my soul.
Yeah. So you on the mental weakness part, and I've heard you be quoted as saying that there's a lot of shame around this topic. Like there's a lot of embarrassment and shame that people have about having the yips. And a lot of your work today revolves around mental toughness, but you don't believe that it's a case of being mentally weak. In fact, you frame it as kind of the opposite, right?
It's the opposite because a player that is showing up and competing with this condition that's mental toughness on display. Knowing that you're struggling, not know why you're struggling, and continuing to go out and attempt to develop a solution and overcome it, and putting yourself out there and knowing that there's going to be embarrassment and frustration, and knowing that you don't know what the solution is, but you're going to go out there and you're going to try. Yeah, that's mental toughness on display. And I went to BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, which notoriously has an attrition rate of anywhere from 70 to 90% or so, and ours was no different. We had about 135 men start, and at the end of Hell Week, there were 20 of us left. I was one of those 20, and I still couldn't throw a baseball properly due to the yips. Getting through Hell Week requires a tremendous amount of mental fortitude and toughness, and I was able to do that. And at that very exact same point in life, still could not throw a ball due to the yips. So if I proved that I was extremely mentally tough and at the same time couldn't throw a ball due to the yips, then it follows that the yips cannot be due to a lack of mental toughness. And that's very important. That's the first thing that I share with players that I work with to help relieve them of that shame and guilt, because the yips plays at the short putts and the short chips and the short throws in baseball. So it's very embarrassing, and it wears at our ego and our pride, and it's confusing because we don't understand why it's happening. So I want them to know that, I was a Navy SEAL. I had it. Tyler Matsek is a World Series champion who has the nickname Nutsack, by the way, for his ability to handle high-pressure situations, and he had it. You look at add Lucas Glover to the list now. And those are not mentally weak people. Those are not underachievers. So you're in a group of decent people.
Yes, for sure. I have a lot of questions about BUDS, but before that, you've since studied Yips quite extensively. And now it's your job. A part of your job is to really help people overcome it. What do you understand about them now as far as the root causes, the symptoms? Where is it coming from?
Yeah, cause and effect is tough, but I think it's based in experiences mostly, and how that comes together. It's involuntary tension. Mind if I just get into the definition of it and then kind of ease into, okay, so yeah. I think it's involuntary tension. So where we traditionally have it wrong is it's treated as kind of traditional performance anxiety. And the way I look at performance anxiety means I understand the situation that I'm in, what's at stake, and I can't gain my composure and compete within it. I'm nervous because there's $1 million at stake and the bases are loaded, and that's not the same thing. A lot of times when people go out and they experience the yips, especially for me and every client I've talked to, actually, they say it felt like a normal day. I didn't feel an elevated level of nerves or pressure. As I said, I was in a subpar pressure environment versus an elevated one when I first experienced it. So that's not what it is. And it's involuntary tension, and involuntary is the key. It's not a rational conscious fear. It's a subconscious response to threat. It's the predatory survival instincts kicking in. It's saying protect yourself. And the body's instinctual response to protect itself is to create tension and make things tight. So right now, there's no threat coming from me, right? We're friends and pals sitting across the table. So if for no reason whatsoever, I just jumped over the table and threw a punch at your chest, you're going to react to it in some way, right?
Yes.
And that's probably not going to loosen up and just absorb the blow.
No.
You're going to make if I threw it at your chest, you're going to make this tight to absorb the blow, because that's what the body does to protect itself. So the body is the subconscious and the central nervous system, and how it's working together is perceiving a threat, and it's saying protect yourself, and the body's instinctual response is to engage muscle tension to do so. That tension then creates a mechanical interruption. Now, when we have a mechanical interruption or error, typically it's due to a couple of things, either ignorance or awareness. So I don't really golf all that much, so if I went out, you'd be like, hey man, you're holding the club wrong and standing wrong. Do this instead of that. And I would say, okay, I will now do this instead of that. Make a conscious choice, do it. Or maybe we don't realize something's off that day, and your swing coach shows you a video and says, hey, you're flying open or whatever it is a little bit, and you need to, correct that back to what you do most of the time. You say, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. I will choose to now do so, and do it just by thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Why the yips is difficult is because it's taking place in that automated part of our being, okay? That instinctual response part that is developed over the course of time. So a very similar occurrence takes place in shooting a gun, Have you ever shot a pistol before?
Yes.
Okay. So understanding the mechanics of how to shoot a pistol is very simple. Grip, stance, follow through. There's a 3-year-old can understand how to do it. Application is a little more difficult, and the reason why is when you'll dry fire, you just press the trigger without rounds in the gun. Nobody moves. Sights stay on target. Everything's clean. Put a round in the gun, rack one home, press the trigger, and people miss, not because they don't understand how to fire the gun properly, mechanically sound. They miss because as they press that trigger, the subconscious says explosion's taking place in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
You need to prepare for it, and you get a little bit of tension in the forearms, and that little bit of tension pushes the barrel. You miss up into the left, or you yank, it goes down into the right, even though you're attempting not to. You're saying don't flinch, and you do it anyways.
Yes.
Right? So a very similar thing occurs. So as people grow up playing golf, a lot of their identity gets attached to the game. Their self-worth is found in it. And that was true for me in baseball. I grew up very shy when I was little, and baseball was an outlet for social acceptance and to make a name for myself. I develop an ego and identity. I was good at it. I was good at it because I put in the work and because I loved it. And I loved baseball more than I loved most people, So any threat to it was like you're losing a part of yourself. It can be perceived as a life and death danger depending on how all that's developed. And that was a key transition when I imploded, and then being able to be successful and become a SEAL is what I learned about myself there. But I think as the conditions increase, so as you move up the ranks, skill sets increase, so it's harder to maintain your career, get to the next level and then maintain it when you're there because everybody's good. Right. And then the consequence for success or failure also increase in their effect. So in college baseball, I was either going to be drafted and play pro ball, which was huge for me because I want to be able to say I was a pro baseball player, to stick it to everybody. Right. And, but I'm either going to be a pro baseball player or I'm going to be done playing or try to make my way through, a non-affiliated team somewhere or something like that. So not only does it increase, it also, the separation and their effect increases. So an example I use is if you kick a soccer ball, okay, say you're going to take a penalty kick in soccer, you got a pretty big ball, pretty big net, and you remove the goalie, it's like just kick the ball in the net from that distance. You could probably do it. So, well, there's $5 million at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now there's $5 million, or we're going to take everything you own from you. Now there's a gun to your head. Now there's a gun to your kid's head. And you see as the conditions escalate, the separation and consequence of success or failure also escalates. The central nervous system perceives a threat. You can probably start to feel it as I'm talking through that already.
Yeah.
And its responses to tighten up.
Yeah. So the threat in your case in college baseball could be the sort of like the loss of identity, whereas you identified as this great baseball player, your whole life was building up to playing professional baseball, and now that's sort of right in focus right there, right? Is that how I'm understanding it?
That's part of it, and everybody's a little bit different too in their storyline, but it's usually a different version of the same story as I listen to guys tell me what's going on. And it's also through, everybody experiences common adversities in the game. Bad weather in baseball, maybe a bad call by an umpire, an injury, whatever. But then you throw in the anomalies and things become defensive. So perhaps, you come in to be a utility player and they say you can't hit anymore. You're just going to be a pitcher and you're not going to have a chance to hit anymore. Perhaps, coaches go hands-on with you sometimes or shame you in front of everybody when you didn't really make a mentally weak play, you just made a bad throw.
Sure.
You made an aggressive throw and one got away from you because the game is hard and you get shamed in front of everybody for that. Not one time, like you can't handle that, but over and over and over again. Scholarship money threatened to be pulled, actually pulled, you name it. And and I'm generalizing, but that's kind of how my baseball career was from the time I was 16 on. That 16-year-old summer was the last time I can really remember it being completely pure. Now, it didn't mean there wasn't good times. My junior year in college, that was such good dudes on the team and a wonderful time, but there were some other things that were going on as well. And I don't blame anyone. I placed my need for affirmation and validation into some sources in terms of entities. It can be an entity like Pro Ball or NCAA or MLB or PGA, and it can be a person. And I placed that need of validation and affirmation in some sources that were never going to give it to me for whatever reason. And that's my fault, not anybody else's. I just didn't have the self-awareness and maturity yet, and that's how we learn. We grow through those things and figure that stuff out.
Yeah, so these threats can come from interpersonal relationships. They can come from expectations or baggage or, yeah.
And you're completely unaware of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Hence the subconscious part, right?
Exactly.
And why it's difficult to diagnose. What were your initial conversations with Lucas Glover like on what he was going through?
So same thing. We wanted to define it and talk about my experience, create some connection and relation in what was happening. I wanted to define it for him mostly so he understood what was actually going on with his body, because I think that is the biggest thing that is going wrong out there, at least in what I have seen, is that we cannot create an effective solution if we're not defining the problem correctly from the beginning. We're not solving the right problem. So, hey man, this is due to, I wouldn't say maybe no real fault of your own, but maybe, perhaps there's not really much you could have done to avoid it though. It could happen to anyone. And it tends to happen to high achievers who are authentic, genuine people and really care for all the right reasons.
Why is that, you think?
They don't want to let other people down, and they love the game and don't want to lose it. They want to keep playing it. And sometimes I think, that identity gets a little bit too dependent on external sources versus grounded on the inside, because we don't want to be arrogant, So anyways, we started there by defining the problem and telling him a lot about my story and how I went about solving it, and then, outlining what that was going to look like for him.
What did that plan look like?
So we have a few steps to the practical approach. There's ways of striking the ball to retrain the subconscious to trust freedom and dexterity and get fluidity in our stroke back. So we attack it right at the mechanical interruption point. That's how we start, through a simulated dry fire. So one thing I learned in the SEAL teams when we shot a pistol was, one, I had a bad flinch with the pistol.
Yeah.
And one day we were training, and someone who had trained extensively with competition shooters had asked them, how do you not flinch? If you don't want to flinch and you're telling yourself not to flinch and you flinch anyways, how do you not do it? Great question.
Don't think about white bears.
Yeah. So exactly. And we talk about that in a bit too, right? But he said, well, what we do is we dry fire 75% more than we fire with rounds in the gun to train the subconscious that when we press the trigger, nothing happens when we default into a dynamic automated mode. So
dry fire would be shooting blanks or shooting nothing at all?
Shooting nothing at all. Well, just clicking the gun. Yeah.
Okay.
Just click, racket, click, racket, click.
Okay. So like practice swings.
I developed that in baseball. And then when I started working on golf, I developed a way to do that. And it's just repetition, 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 focusing on a clean connection with the ball or some point in the swing where it's, if I do this, the rest will follow. And my whole conscious mind is focused there. So the conscious mind can only solve one problem at a time. It can follow a sequence, 1, 2, 3, and it can loop 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But if my subconscious is creating a mechanical interruption, automating it, then the only way to defeat that automation is to take all of my this is the only thing I have to use is my conscious effort, right? And then how I can take physical action through that. And I want to focus it all right where it's being interrupted and override it. But we have to reduce the environmental conditions into a capacity where we can achieve success. So what I mean is, when I went out to throw in baseball and I was yipping, I never shortened way up or went and threw by myself into a net from 5 yards away or whatever. Everybody's baseline's different.
Right.
Some people can start here, there, or the other thing. Mine was severe. I might have had to stand on the ocean or the beach and try to hit water, but but you just get that action back. So that's where we start, right where it's being interrupted, and we start. And I mean, thousands of times if we can.
So Lucas Glover's out there making practice strokes with no ball.
With a ball, we do it with a ball.
With a ball,
you can do it without a ball,
but no target.
No target. Yep.
Okay.
And you're focusing on the connection, and every time you make connection, you intentionally reward that feeling to let it feel good. And I don't get into the science of it, but I believe what's happening is dopamine is being released and associating that action with solution.
What are some rewards What do you mean by rewards?
Just let it feel good on the inside.
Love that.
Because that's part of it too. So when we get into we only scratch the surface of cause and effect, but
Sure.
Part of it's timeline crunch too. You throw an injury in there your senior season, and your timeline to get drafted is now, shortened. But another thing is as you move up the ranks, when I go watch my son play baseball, he's 7. If they catch a ground ball and throw somebody out at first, the whole place goes nuts. Why? Because it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
As you get older, what do you start to hear? Hit him in the chest, get the bunt down, over and all this stuff. So all these small things that used to bring us joy in the game become something to be expected rather than rewarded.
Mm.
And when we do something well, especially as we escalate up to the pro levels, well, I'm just doing my job. I close the game, but that's what I'm supposed to do. And I just, and that's how you feel a lot of times, rather than letting that feel good. And so when you do something really well, you're getting a real small positive feeling, and when you do something bad, you're getting a really strong negative feeling, and that sticks with you. Like, you can't remember what you ate for lunch 3 days ago, probably, or 4 days ago, because it's not emotionally impactful.
Yeah.
But when something really negative or really good happens, the body remembers it. It registers.
Yeah.
And so we want to reverse that as well as we move along the progression of the system.
That's interesting that you say that, because golf is in a lot of ways unbalanced as far as sort of like the output to effort. So like it takes, if you've ever tried to make 3 birdies in a row, it's like 9 perfect shots in a row, right? Assuming you play all par 4s. Just make a birdie, right? Just to make one birdie, you have to stripe a tee shot. You have to hit a good second shot, presumably, unless something funky happens. And then you have to hole a putt. You get 1 stroke back to par, But if you block one way right, you're losing 2 strokes automatically, right? So what you're saying is that you should reward yourself for even, hitting a 2-footer right in the middle of the hole.
In some capacity, yes. And as far as training through the yips, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's more in a practice scenario than it would be live. But yes, live too. Sure.
Okay, so what about the live scenario? I've heard you, and tell me if I'm skipping too far ahead. But one thing Lucas has talked about was feeling like he's attacking, on playing offense with the putter in his hand as opposed to playing defense. And I found that interesting because there's a sort of a natural defensive tendency to putting, whereas even if you are a good putter and you're 40 feet away, you're snuggling it up, or you're trying not to hit it 10 feet by, or if you have, on the PGA Tour and you have a super fast, quick 3-footer, you have to be sort of cautious. So tell me about going on the offensive with something like the putter.
Okay, so there's a couple of ways that we talk about with that. And so on one of them, we talk about a relentless desire to win through the fundamentals of winning. So I have the traditional performance training that I do outside of the yips, and that's part of that there. And then there's also, we're going to attack the yips and defeat this thing. It's been kicking our tail for so long, but part of it too is getting buy-in, because they've tried everything. I tried getting hypnotized, and people do this, that, and the other thing, and nothing that I have seen has created a consistent and effective solution. And that's part of the reason. Well, now we can. So, Lucas and others well along their way, Matsek, myself as a example, like this works. It's not easy, and it's not a short process. It takes a minute because we have to rehabilitate ourselves. It's a training program, but we want to attack it with that mentality. We're going on the offense, and we're gonna kick this thing's butt. And but in the more micro sense of the yips, one thing that we'll do is there's something called the roller coaster effect. So the yips, initially you feel that muscle tension. As you make ridiculously inaccurate shots, you start to go out and you don't know what's happening. You get what's similar to an adrenaline hit, and it's very similar to, I think it's similar to post-traumatic stress too. So I almost drowned off the side of a submarine one time. I got caught by the prop wash of the submarine, spun out onto the water in the middle of the night, and I pulled the thing on my UDT life vest and the actuator, and it brought me up to the surface before I went out. And I was getting on a helicopter to jump out a few weeks later into the ocean. We call it casting. It's really easy. Anyone can do it. And it's really fun. And all of a sudden, everything in my body's like getting really tight. My heart rate's increasing. My muscles are tensing up. Now here I was fine. I remember laughing at myself and smiling, dude, telling my body to calm down. Like, what's going on here? But what I think's happening now through years of reflection is my nervous system and subconscious is saying, hey, this is similar to an environment to one that's almost killed you. You need to pay attention to it. Okay. Now, all I had to do there was make my legs work and fall out of the back of the helicopter, right? But when we need to do something that requires fine dexterity in a joint, okay, then it causes issues because any interruption in that joint, in the fluidity of that delivery is going to cause a mechanical interruption. So what you see is the ball will squirt wet high in arm side, and the club face will open in golf. So it's the same problem, just a different action. Baseball, what happens is as they try to, like, man, I got to extend and follow through that, they can't, and the fingers wrap around the side of the ball, and they get the slider, spinner, the spike. Same thing in golf. Wow, I got to follow through, I got to extend. The putter head now, instead of opening up, closes around the side of them, and you see it go that way, and then translate that to chipping. I got off topic with the aggression and the predatory. Okay, so we have a way to manage that roller coaster effect. That's what I call it. You feel a tingling sensation, can't feel your hands and feet. Now, when people say, so if you're a golfer listening, it feels like I can't feel my hands and feet, it's not because you feel like that's what you're feeling. That's actually what you're feeling. Because when the body perceives danger, it extrapolates the blood from the extremities into the vital organs to keep you alive if you were to receive a mortal wound. And because it's perceiving threat, right? And rationally, it's not a threat. It's like, okay, it's just construction workers over there watching me. And, it could be a lot of people, or it could be certain people that are watching that engage. It's weird how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, so this thing engages. What we don't have is a way to turn it off. And that's what people are taught is, okay, well, just kind of remember this throw you made when you were 12 and how good that feels, and stay in this kind of zenned out process. And you're trying to like ward it off. And it works a little bit. You can get a little bit better, but you can't play dynamically like that. And you can't play, eventually it's going to get you, like when you're pitching, like I could play catch like that a little bit in this kind of, alternate state in my mind, but I can't throw pickoffs and field ground balls and pitch and play baseball that way.
Yeah. So
we bring it back down through this method I call talking to the tension, which is much more in depth, but similar to that helicopter, but then we do the predator prey and we switch into aggression. But the aggression is not target-oriented. Normally in baseball, we're throwing through the mitt, or in golf, we're going to sink the putt, or we're going to, land it on the green or whatever. We're going to divert it from target orientation and into connection. So I'm channeling that predator mentality into connection with the ball, where what's so frustrating was once I had made peace with what was going on, I still didn't know the yips or heard of that term, but I was in a bullpen after I threw the record amount of pitches, and I knew I wasn't going back in a game. I knew coach wasn't going to put me back in. But I had a really good relationship with my pitching coach and our catcher that was in the bullpen. And I went in there to throw, and I didn't feel nervous at all. Felt so good. And I got on the mound and was like, all right, man, just rock and fire. Because I meet guys like that, too, who are like, dude, I don't really get the roller coaster effect anymore. I just can't. I'm still shanking them everywhere.
It's just involuntary.
And that's where I was at in that bullpen. The problem was I was still trying to throw a strike. Okay, instead of trying to gain a quality release. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
process versus outcome.
There's something called front sight focus when you shoot a pistol. So to shoot accurately, you focus your vision on the front sight of the gun. Now, in reality, when you combat shoot and you get really good, it's a little bit of give and take, speed and accuracy. Okay, but if you want to shoot accurately, that's what you do, and that's how you train. Then you go in a kill house, and we'll use simunitions and paint in our guns, and they'll put a live role player in there, and this guy goes for a gun and you're engaged and boom, 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 and they'll ask you, or you ask them if you're one of the guys training now, and they'll say, draw on the whiteboard your sight picture. What did you see? How crystal clear was that front sight? You're like, dude, I didn't see anything. I pulled out my gun. I saw somebody shooting at me, so I pulled out my gun and started pressing the trigger as fast as I could, right? So why is it hard to retract your focus in a dynamic situation when you just did it on the range over and over again? Because the target is the threat. All the emotion is attached to out there. And the more times you've gone out there and yipped, the stronger that is and the harder it is to give that up. So we're not giving up. And I don't teach apathy. And I've heard guys tell me their sports psych told them to be apathetic or care less than they do. And it's ridiculous. One, it's not possible. Okay. And two, even if it was, it would take away the joy of the achievement and winning. So there's no point to going out there and doing it. So we still have the desire to succeed, but we're giving up mental attention to the outcome and channeling it into right where the mechanical interruption is taking place. So now I'm thinking of it like this. Okay, my visual focus is on the ball. My emotional focus, I've intentionally shifted it into aggression. Tyler Matsek came up with something called a pre-throw thought to initiate an aggressive mental mindset. So, a word or a phrase, I'm aggressive now, and then channeling that predator mentality rather than into the mitt or into the hole, but into the connection of the ball. So I'm diverting it, right? I'm hunting the connection.
And it's something you can feel?
I think so, yeah.
Physically?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you bring it down and then initiate aggression. You can't control what you feel initially, right? If you smack me in the face right now, I'm probably going to be upset about that. I'm going to be confused and angry.
I would
right?
never do that. Yeah.
Okay, because it's from the stimulus of the environment, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But then I have a choice. And so if I think, hey, you know what? I want to reach over and hit him back, but maybe that's not the best choice for me to make right now. Maybe there's a better way to handle this. Okay, so what I do is it's replacement. Once you feel something, it's replace it with what you need. And I think that's what mental toughness really is. Mental toughness doesn't mean you don't feel. Navy SEALs aren't a bunch of sociopaths. We feel everything anyone else does. How fast can you shift your focus? And how fast can you transition your emotions into something that is effective to perform well in a high-pressure environment?
Mm-hmm.
That's what mental toughness is to me, I believe.
So there's a very conscious sort of present sort of solution. Wouldn't you agree? Like that is a feeling the body, going into the body, understanding what emotions or feelings are popping up at the time, and then solving it with different emotions. That's a very conscious, present solution to what you are saying is a subconscious sort of problem.
Yes, because you can't really control your subconscious, right? It just does things.
Yeah,
for
it
the
just
most
does
part.
dumb shit.
I mean, you can train habits and different responses to whatever.
Yeah.
And it can change over time, I guess. For a while, if I hear a car backfire, I'll kind of flinch or whatever. For a while, when I would get overseas, because it's associating it with gunfire.
Right.
Or I always look. I'll look to see where it's at, and it doesn't mean because I'm disassociated and think I'm in a gunfight. I'm just addressing what is being perceived as a threat as I get that. Okay, so, but we really only have our conscious mind to battle it. So because here's what happens: is you walk up, guys know what's going to happen before it happens, right? It's like, okay, everything's going swell, everything's good. Here's a shot. Oh man, that's one that's kind of in one of those weird places that makes me feel this way, and then. There's this person watching who, for whatever reason, indicates it. And again, they may not even have any idea why this certain person,
right,
causes it to happen, and whatever. And I really don't even get into that much cause and effect with players. It's the solution that matters. Like when I say, there's a lot of revisiting your trauma in sports psychology, and it's like, okay, but so what? Okay, now we know how. We've connected the dots to this point. We still got to beat this damn thing. So, anyways, I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I really like the fact that you are going beyond sort of wordy solutions where it's like focus on the process and care less, right? Because at the end of the day, people who have this problem, and also interesting to note that a lot of them that you're saying do care, right? Because a lot of us that can't seem to get over whatever mental hurdles it is, I don't think it doesn't seem like there's a consistent way to trick yourself into thinking that you don't care about this thing.
And it's tricks. It's tricking yourself. Okay, so I can understand when there's no bullets in the gun, whether there's real bullets in the gun, but I can't trick myself. I know it's reality. I know when there's a bullet in there and it's going to go boom and when it's not.
Right.
And I can tell myself it's only 60.5 feet away. It's 3 to 5 foot on the putt, and but it's different, and the body's perceiving it differently. And as I trust the process, and there's a time and place for that phrase that I think is very valuable, but it's being overused. If your process is producing a bad outcome over and over again, then you need to trust the outcome because your process sucks, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how I look at the yips. Like nothing's working, and we're just going out there and telling people to do the same stuff over and over again. Tap yourself, visualize, meditate and box breathe and all this, and none of it works for people. And these guys are going out there trusting what they're being told, and then it's not working for them, and it's just not right in my opinion. So I finally started asking myself the right questions. I came home from a deployment one day, and there was a baseball sitting in our living room, at my parents' house, and they were in the kitchen or something, and I picked up the ball, and I wanted to throw it into the recliner. And here I'm a combat veteran SEAL at this point, and I'm still worried I'm going to throw the ball through the window, you know? So I pick up the ball, and I looked at it, and I was like, where's it getting me? And I'm like, from here to here. That was the first right question that I asked myself. And I just started kind of reverse engineering from there. That now that I had some life experience and maturity, I started really reflecting and examining what had happened, what is happening, and then how do you beat it? And I just started putting it together.
And were all these lessons, were all of these tools things that you developed in the SEALs?
Mostly, what I learned in the SEAL teams provided really good analogies for things, like the shooting example. I mean, we were shooting, and I realized that flinch is, what it was and how it's occurring. I was like, that's when I felt the epiphany, like light was shining down from heaven. Like, that's what was happening to you in baseball. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, maybe I can actually figure out a solution to this thing now that I have a better understanding of the problem. And then some of it was through, when we talked about identity earlier, when I imploded in baseball, things got really dark for a while because I didn't have a plan B, and I just really wanted to play pro ball. And when I broke, I didn't know how to handle myself. I just didn't know what to do with myself. I had no direction. Nothing sounded challenging to me. I loved playing baseball. I had no place to play. Couldn't play it even if I wanted to, and it just ate me up. So one night I was sitting there and I was reaching for a bottle of whiskey just to plug it and go to sleep. And those kind of nights were starting to add up. There were nights I just literally couldn't sleep. I'd lay there and kind of maybe drift in and out or whatever, but not really sleep at all. So I stopped and I pushed the bottle away, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to not do that, Yeah. And then I was like, what do I do next? And it's still so full of tension, not the muscle tension, but just, like, oh, it's bitter. Confused, angry, frustrated. So I stopped and I prayed. And, I grew up in faith and everything, but wasn't super impressed by a lot of the men I saw in church. I thought that they would sell their moral courage at the first sign of danger, but always couldn't deny the role of faith in Jesus had played in my life. And so I just tried to connect to my Creator, whatever that is. I was like, I'm here, so I didn't come from nowhere. Something made me, and it's probably smarter than I am, whatever it is. So I'm going to try to talk to it, connect to it. So I sat there and I was still, and I just tried to feel. I said, help me. I started to cry. And I was like, why? Like, why did this happen? Because if I could just get my head wrapped around the purpose of what I was experiencing, then I could move forward. But I was just stuck, and I think the victim mentality, like, we're all victims of something. Are you a victim or are you not? Everybody's a victim of something because life's inherently unfair.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's when helplessness and self-loathing drive our decision making. It creates hell on earth, and that's where I was at. So self-pity has no value, and so I had to get off of it, but I just didn't know what to do. So that's where I started, was there. And as I sat there and I was still and I tried to pray or just connect to God, and I said, why? I felt these words on my heart. Not visibly, not audibly. There was no vision or anything like that. I wasn't in a dreamlike state, but I just felt these words on my soul from somewhere other than myself. Just wait, something better is coming for you. I didn't know what that would be, but in that moment I had faith that there was purpose to what I was experiencing, because prior to it, I thought I lost my purpose in life and I was just going to drift through life in some lesser existence now, not a ball player. But when I stopped viewing it as having taken my purpose and viewed it as having purpose for me to be forged into a more capable person, is when everything changed for me. And I realized a couple of things. Is that, one, there were some really bad things that happened. I haven't gone into the depth of that, and some pretty unfair things that happened. As I said, I don't blame anyone but myself for those things. But eventually I had to look internal. Like, how did I help contribute to it? What do I need to learn about myself to move forward, regardless of how unfair that might be? So I looked at God and I looked at myself, and I realized that baseball defined me. I was dependent on it for my sense of self-worth. You see, that word dependency is the key. I want to value things. Like, there's a part of me that will always be a SEAL. There's a part of me that will always be a ball player. But the dependency on it for my sense of self-worth and ego is what changed. So I learned a phrase: what I do should not define who I am should define what I do. And the transition that I made, that I think helped me be successful at Buds and have some sort of career in the SEAL teams, was that as a ball player, the game, the profession, defined my sense of self-worth, whereas a SEAL, or training to be one, I tried to allow my sense of self-worth to create my success in the profession. I thought through the good things. I stood my ground and fought as a kid. I wasn't a bully, protecting myself, protecting others. The game-winning hits, the no-hitters. And I thought to myself, man, those things are true. High achievers, we focus on the bad things a lot, the things that went wrong, what we didn't accomplish. Everyone that I've met that has accomplished a lot feels that way, and everybody else looks at them as tremendously successful. So I started thinking about those good things, and I thought, man, you don't need anybody's validation of that. They've already happened. It's true. So just be grounded in the truth of who you are, but channel it into service of team and mission. And I couldn't have articulated that when I was 21 years old, but that's the transition that was made in my heart.
Well, you can do a lot with that type of thinking. What I'm trying to understand is why you would then go and try to apply it to the single most demanding, psychologically, physically, just excruciating experience I think anyone can put themselves through, which is buds.
Oh, buds, yeah. Why I would want to do that?
Yeah.
Well, 9/11 was very recent. It was the fall of my senior season in baseball. So that spring when I threw those wild pitches, that was just, we were less than a year out from that. I needed something meaningful to commit my life to. I thought about I could get a job and take the path of least resistance and put some money in the bank. And believe me, that thought crossed you've been through this hell in baseball. Why go, right, exactly how you worded it.
Why literally choose hell again.
But let's say I take that path of least resistance, the comfortable route. Where am I 5 years from there? Do I feel any sort of fulfillment? I'll still be comfortable, but I think it was Jordan Peterson who says it's the pursuit of an aim that keeps our soul alive. And I believe there's some science that actually backs that. They're finding out. And that's what I needed, was something that was worthy to pursue, something meaningful. And I couldn't think of anything more meaningful to commit my life to as a capable young man. I loved the sense of team. As a top 25 ranking as a mid-major, we had a really close team to play to that level. It wasn't just baseball.
Right.
We had some guys who could play, but our team was so close, and I loved that. And I'd been on a few other teams that were kind of like that, and I knew that I would find that probably in a SEAL platoon, and absolutely did. Love those guys. That's what I miss every day is the guys. And it seemed challenging. I was a little bit afraid of it. And just like a huge adventure. Now we look at Iraq, Afghanistan, and these wars and the perspective that we have it on this side. But back then, it was all new. I was like, man, I could be a part of writing history, or I can go work, as a manager at the shop down the road or whatever,
Yeah.
And so that's what I wanted to go do. And my true nature, I think, has always been as a protector. And this is a way for me to help protect people. Is one through the SEAL teams was, to go stop that from happening again, is how I saw it. And I wanted to, protect our country from a bully, protect innocent people from being harmed. When you watch that second plane hit live on television and people deciding whether they're going to jump off or burn or whatever it is they're going to do, I was pissed. I wanted to fight about it, provide justice for the innocent. And it was a path for redemption for my failure in baseball, to prove to myself that I was who I thought I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't want to just move into, I could not move into life, start a family and whatever else with that.
Sure. You had to get through that.
Yeah.
So look, there's a lot of stories about, buds training in general, about the SEALs in general. What is the truth about your experience there, going through that process and making it through? How hard was it?
It's what they say it is. Yeah.
What types of things are you subjected to? Were you?
Hypothermia. Well, the numbers on Hell Week are pretty simple. An average class runs over 200 miles during that week. You sleep a total of 4 hours the entire week. It starts on a Sunday afternoon. You don't sleep at all until Wednesday. That's for 2 hours. And people are like, oh, you get 2 hours of sleep. But it's not actually really a good thing, because trying to lay down and you're in a little cot in a tent and your hip flexors are cramping and whatever. And then if you do fall asleep, it's wake up and that felt like seconds and you're in the water again. You're just better to stay on the move,
Did you sleep for those 2 hours?
I don't think, not really, not me. I think some guys did. I remember that part. I don't know how I remember that part, probably because of how miserable I was, because you have a moment to sit there and focus on how miserable you are, because you're not moving anymore. I just remember my hip flexors just aching and cramps and stuff like that, and being kind of relieved when I wasn't soaking wet anymore. And when they said hit the surf, it sucks, man, because you don't want to go get in that water again. But being kind of relieved that we were moving again. It's like let's just get going.
Let's just get it over with.
So there's that. Hypothermia. There's surf torture. You lay in the water, so you're basically in hypothermia, pull out over and over again. But there's no real breaks. You're always on the move and you're always competing. So it may not look like you're going real fast when you watch it from the outside in on, say, by Wednesday, but those guys are going as hard as they can. It feels like you're going 100 miles an hour. And, Hell Week, Buds and Hell Week all, later on in the teams, we all have our hopes and perspective of what you think the SEAL teams are going to be and what you're going to be doing. And not all of that is, lives up to your expectations. And, how could it? Because you've built it up to be.
Yeah.
But, Buds and Hell Week did. Yeah.
What was the closest you came to ringing the bell? It's ringing the bell, right?
Yeah.
When you quit?
Yeah, you ring the bell 3 times to quit. Say I quit. Put your helmet on the ground. So I'd like to say that it never crossed my mind, but there was one time when I made it an option, I would say. Now, I never said I want to quit or was thinking about quitting. So as you guys edit this, you got to make sure the context is right on this one, right?
Yes. He did not quit. It was it was a multiple choice, and it appeared suddenly.
I believe it was Monday morning. We were getting surf tortured. The night before, we had ran about 15 miles. Ran 5 miles, I think, with logs. Put them down. Ran 5 miles back. Picked up our boats. Ran the boats back. The boat bounces up and down on your head as a team. You're racing. We're doing surf passage. You're getting crushed by those waves, as you try to row through them. Then we did rock portage, and you land those boats on a big rock jetty while the waves are crashing. It's dark. It's dangerous. That was the one evolution where I was afraid because they just didn't have that much control over it. Ankle snap, you name it. So we got done with that, and then we're getting surf tortured. I never minded surf torture. I was kind of looked at it as like an ice bath until now. For whatever reason, I don't know if the intensity of the situation or if the water was actually colder, that I don't know. But maybe we did more rounds. I can't really remember, but it was hurting. And I remember we had done, 3 or 4 iterations of it in and out, about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the temperature of the water. They'll measure it. And we had done what I thought had to have been the last one. We did another round. I was like, oh, man. The guys are getting up out of the water to quit. And this and that. Okay. Got up out of that one. I was like, all right, I made it, And Buds, you're always suffering, but it's a different kind of suffering. If you're running, you're not freezing, and if you're freezing, you're not running, and whatever. So it's like, all right, we'll move on and do something. I was like, backs, meaning put your backs in the water. And I just somehow forced myself backwards. And I would sing Time Is On My Side, that old classic song, because no matter what they did, they could take my body heat or whatever, but they couldn't take time. The time had to tick, and every second's closer to graduation, right? So I just keep that in mind. But now there's no song, there's no nothing. I'm just kind of gritting through it. Got up out of the water, and one of the instructors comes up to me. I'm kind of stumbling onto the beach. Can't really feel my hands and feet. Probably got the beginning stages of hypothermia. And they got the bell right out in front of us on the beach. And there's burritos and coffee and warm blankets and a line. And, a lot of guys that I knew were in that line, guys that I looked up to and respected. So it helps kind of justify it to you, Now, I wasn't searching it out. It's just right there. You can't miss it. And I'm kind of looking at it and stumbling up onto the beach, trying to get my bearings, get my legs moving. And one of the instructors comes up and he says, hey, man, you're done, bud. It's time for you to quit. Go over to the bell, quit. There's no shame in it. And I managed to say, negative. And everything inside wanted to go get a burrito and some coffee. It's like my mouth was the last filter to just no, And then he looked at me and he said, yeah, hey, look, everybody in the class hates you. And it's time for you to quit. Let's go over to the bell and quit. Most people heard the story, burn the ships. That's kind of the mentality I had going in. Like, quitting's just not an option. And so I wasn't going to make it one. And that was the first time where I opened up the thought, and it kind of went like, well, what would I tell people if I went home? And I had written in my hat, in the bill of my hat, which is really super cheesy. I shouldn't say that on camera here, but some guys would do it. I never really looked at it, but I had written phone call. Like, I'm going to make a phone call at some point in this week or at the end of it, and it's either successful or unsuccessful, back to my mom. And I wanted to tell her that I made it, because she knew what I'd been through and everything else and different things. And so anyways, I was thinking, like, what will I tell her if I quit? And the only thing was that these guys who make it through are more badass than I am. I didn't have what it takes. And that was just unacceptable to me. All I ever wanted my whole life was to be in a situation where there weren't daddies contributing to booster clubs, where there weren't all these anomalies in the situation. It was a fair deal. It was hard, but the standard was the standard, and that's all it was. And I thought to myself, I looked at the bell, and it was the same distance as my boat crew, where this all happens in like a matter of seconds.
I'm shocked you even remember this.
And but I remember telling myself, it's the same distance. You can't just lay down here and die. You've got to go to the bell and quit. So if you can go that distance in the wrong directions, you can go that distance in the right direction. So just go there. Just get to there. Don't think about anything else but getting to your boat crew. And I still didn't want to go, so I was like, the question isn't, can you get to Friday with no sleep? It's just Monday, you know? The question is, do you have more? And if the question is yes, then to have integrity and answer that, you know, tell my mom properly, then I need to at least take that step in the right direction. So I did, and then that was that. And nobody hated me. They say that to everybody. My buddies told me later. It's like, you guys all hate me? They're like, no, man, they just told me that a while ago too. Like, so we broed it out real good.
It's a mind game.
It is a mind game, yeah.
Yeah. What do you feel like after that week is over?
Very well. It's very rewarding. You're pretty wrecked, your body, you know.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to sleep the whole weekend. I slept like 6 hours. And I woke up, you're on a mattress on the floor in a room, so you don't, you know, convulse or I don't know what and fall out of your bed, I guess. And I'm assuming that's why. But, and I got to pee, you know. So I tried to get up to go to the bathroom, and I couldn't make my legs work. Like, I could wiggle them. I wasn't paralyzed, but they were so swollen I couldn't walk. And I saw this big empty Gatorade bottle there, like one of the gallon ones.
Oh, no.
I was like, what's that there for? And then it hit me. I was like, oh, they put that there so we could take a leak. So we got that. But I went to go take a shower, and all I wanted to do was steam out this shower. And that weekend, that day, the hot water was broken, and all we had was cold water.
You're joking.
And that was the closest I came to crying as during my SEAL career.
That is a extra hell week.
Yeah.
So after that, I presume you're a Navy SEAL after you get through that.
You go to BUDS, and then you go to a 4-month training called SQT, Jump School, Jump School, then SQT. When I went through, it's a little different now. Then you go to your platoon, and yes, you are a SEAL.
Okay. So what was your role within that unit?
I went to what's called an SDV team. They utilize a submarine. It fills with water, so you're on dive status the whole time you're in it. And my role was I got to go to sniper school as a new guy, I was very
That's unique.
fortunate.
No?
Yeah. Well, it sort of was back then. I mean, there were a handful of us in that class, but it had just started, I think, sending new guys to it. Now I think it's pretty common. But I was really happy about that and pretty much worked reconnaissance out of the back of that submarine.
Was there something ironic, did you feel at the time, about going from not being able to hit the strike zone to a SEAL team sniper?
Maybe. I never really felt that yippee feeling doing that job, though. You know, it was in the back of my mind. It was actually more in the back of my mind when we had to throw a grenade. Is this going to come about? Because it's so similar to throwing a baseball, right?
Oh, no.
But I think just the reality of the moment and what's in your hand kind of overrode any sort of... And you don't have to really, you know, you're throwing it into this big open space, at least when you're first starting with it.
But the consequences...
Yeah, I mean, if you shank it into your feet, you got problems, right? And you've seen baseball players do that with the yips, throw it straight into their feet, you know? Well.
It's true. It's true. So what I'm curious about is there's a lot, and you've hinted at it already, but a lot of this sort of allure, and I don't want to call it romanticism, but it kind of is around the movies, or you see with what you hear people say about the SEALs is that team culture, is the unit, the team unit. Is there a specific moment or mission or memory that you have that you think best exemplifies what that thing is all about?
I was blessed to be in what I believe, and everybody who was in that platoon believes, was one of the best experiences you could have in that sense of a SEAL team. And we had a fantastic deployment together. And it was probably, you know, I don't live in any kind of regret or anything like that, you know, go back and whatever. But if I were to go back and relive any 2 years of my life, it would be that platoon. Alpha Platoon with those guys. Man, yeah,
Is
it was awesome.
Is that camaraderie? Is that based on successes that you had? What is that?
It's trust, and I think trust that is very strongly implemented by the leadership in terms of our LPO and platoon chief and our OIC, our officer in charge. From that level down, everything was about as solid as it could be. And I think that you just had a really very good group of people. There was a lot of adversity that platoon experienced too in the training cycle. There was a helicopter that crashed. Guys were hurt really badly, and some other things. And so, when you go through hard times together, you build trust.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build mental toughness? Go do hard things. How do you build trust with each other? Go do hard things together, and hold the line to the standard. And when I give presentations, I assert that you will reach a higher level of performance by focusing more on others than yourself, even with individual sports such as golf.
Mm.
And I don't mean that in terms of giving something up. It's understanding that a team-first mentality reduces our fear and creates respect and trust and ultimately love, and those are the greatest motivators of aggression. So if you think about it, if you're getting ready, you're getting your combat gear on to go out and go on an operation and you get nervous, you're nervous for your own life and death. What's going to happen to me for the most part? Am I going to live or die when that fear sets in, right? Prior to. Now, fear in the moment is a different thing. People are shooting at you or something. But so that fear is like a parasite feeding off of misplaced concern. If you defer your concern to the well-being of your teammate, it's got nothing to latch onto. Now, can we do that perfectly? No, but it's not that we're that good. It's that everybody else sucks. If we can take it to a level most aren't willing to go by understanding it and discipline fueled by ambition, then we get to a higher level. So we focus on each other. And as you're focused on each other and you interact, you then create the emotions. You see a lot of teams place these taglines everywhere, family, brotherhood, and whatever. And it's a good thing to do, but you have to live it to feel it because that's the only way it works. The action creates the emotion. And then once you feel it, it's very powerful. You don't have to like somebody to respect them, and you don't have to like somebody to trust them, and you don't really have to like somebody to love them necessarily. But when you create that trust, respect, and love, or respect, trust, and love within each other, you think of it like this. If I get people, if you come fight me and you win the fight, you can tell everybody you're more badass than a Navy SEAL. You took me down.
This is the third time you volunteered to fight me to fight you.
There
today.
you go. I don't know why it keeps coming up.
I don't want
something
that.
About your face. I'm joking.
I don't want that problem. Yeah, but yeah. Yes.
Okay, most people won't do it because you're fighting for self-gain, like glory, status, right?
Yep.
But, and that's what motivates most people, status, either through, hey, look at me, I'm a big deal, or through a constant need of affirmation and validation because they don't have that ego and identity solidified like I made in that transition in baseball. All right? So anyways, if you think of it like this, though, what if I had the person you love the most in the world behind me and they've got to come through me? You've got to come through me to get to him or you never see him again.
I'm fucking you up.
There you go. Not only would you fight, you would probably find a way to win.
Yes.
But the problem didn't change. The motivation behind the problem changed. But that feeling you had about that person did not pop out of thin air. It was created by meeting an expectation and a standard over the course of time, right?
Mm.
So that's how a team works.
So how can you apply, just a quick sidebar, how can you apply that thinking to a golfer, an individual? Is that short putt for their family or to get their caddy paid? Like, how does that work?
Right. So it's a little more difficult in golf because it is an individual sport.
Yeah.
Right. Especially once you leave the college ranks and you go to the pro ranks. But there's always a supporting cast of some way, shape, or form. And it's just having that greater sense of purpose of what you're playing for as well. So yes, that could be your family and what you want to provide for them. We've got to be careful, and that's a whole nother conversation about, well, now I'm afraid because I don't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's so also not a great space to be in.
Right. And there's solutions there. But generally, like, hey, I'm playing for something greater than myself in some capacity, whether that's, yes, the caddy can be a part of it. And some of the pro guys I've talked to, that is it. Like, hey, this guy's stuck with me, could have left and gone somewhere else, but held the line with me here. And we're doing this together. This is a team effort. Perhaps whoever you have in terms of an agent, I've got a close relationship with Mac Barnhart, and I know that he really tries to develop his players on and off of the course so that they're leaving their career in a better place all the way around, not just train wrecked and used and abused. And, so keeping people like that are in your cast in your heart and what you're playing for, your swing coach, whatever it is, in that capacity. But it's a little bit more difficult. In Matsek's situation, he came into the World Series in the NLCS 2 years ago, I believe, struck 3 out in a row, 2 of which were all-stars. And if you read one of the articles where he's interviewed, his motivation was not trying to not fail. His motivation wasn't necessarily this, that, or the other thing, or for himself. He was like, Luke Jackson is my buddy, man. We're close. And he had a bad outing, and he had been kind of struggling and, felt like he deserved better. And he was like, point is, I'm here to pick up my boy. That was his motivation in his heart. And he started painting corners with 100 mile an hour, 99 mile an hour cutters, Mm-hmm.
So I think I absolutely understand, and I really like that concept of sort of displacing emotion onto something bigger than yourself, or sort of reallocating it, right? So when you're painting that scene of you're on a chopper or something and you're about to get dropped into the middle of what I presume is a very bad situation or a dangerous situation, and you are putting fear, displacing it into sort of your brothers around you, so it has nothing to latch on to. How is that possible when, back to tricking yourself? Mm-hmm. Can you trick yourself to say, well, my life is not actually on the line here? I would assume that thought pops up, though. It's a life and death scenario.
No, I don't think so, especially if a bullet snaps by.
Right.
I haven't been shot at a lot, but I have been shot at and barely missed several times, where that guy was shooting at me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and most of that took place I guess all of that took place in one particular fight. Anyways, point is, when that happens, yes, you're gonna experience adrenaline, you're gonna experience a level of fear. All right. But if you can trust your preparation due to the attention to detail and relentless effort that you've placed in it, then when you're in that extreme moment with extreme, things lighting off, then you can trust your memory. I could hear, there was at one point a call went out over the radio, said Jason is pinned down. Okay. And I could hear my instructors telling me in their own voices, what it was I should do in that moment. It's like, you already know what to do. Or at least what your options are. And it's prioritizing, what the best options are. And as far as that team first mentality, when I looked over at my teammate and I see he's shooting, moving, and he's communicating back to our assault force, he's communicating with me, he's communicating, he's doing everything he can. He's not running away, and there was no doubt that was going to happen. So a lot, it's not like, is he going to run? It's not like a lot of that's all pre-built through the standard,
Right.
But when I look at him and I see what he's doing and how hard he's fighting for me, then it shifts. And I thought about my little girl for a moment, and it's like, oh, hell no, man. This is where you wanted to be. So do what you came here to do. Wage war. You can control the action you take next and the legacy you leave behind through that action. So even if you get yours out here, at least let your little girl know who her daddy was and have conviction that there's purpose to the outcome, to include death itself. So there was one time when I would deploy and it was just me and my wife, I didn't have a death wish or anything, but it never bothered me. You have to have some fear to have focus. Otherwise, you just walk around and not make tactically sound decisions and get shot. Mm. Okay? So I talk about this in the Yips, is basically, we want 15%. If 15% fear, I like to say concern for the outcome versus fear. So say 15% is where I have concern for the outcome and 85% freedom, and that's optimal. That's where I'm able to really just run and gun and make really good decisions and execute my action where I'm relaxed but focused with a controlled aggression. That's where we want to be, and that's where that line is. It's not always all easy to get there. But so I was in my barracks one day, I guess you would call it, and when I had my daughter was born 3 weeks before we deployed, so she's a newborn girl, and like 2 or 3 months into this, I started getting a little bit defensive, like, man, I really want to get home and see my little girl. I don't want to get mine out here. I want to make it home. And you can't go into a fight trying to not die, or trying to not lose. You have to go in to win. And I knew I needed to change that, so I do what I do in those situations. I stopped and I was quiet and I reflected and I thought and I prayed. And as I prayed, these words kind of came on my heart. are you where you're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to do? And the answer to that in my heart was genuinely yes. So if the answer to that is genuinely yes, then it follows that you have to have conviction that there's purpose to whatever outcome you receive. If you die, perhaps it's an adverse event that is necessary in your daughter's life to help forge her into a person who can fulfill God's will in her life, or what it is she needs to achieve, or perhaps there'll be men brought into her life that would be better mentors for her and along the way. But you can't not just do what you need to do because you're afraid of what may occur and actually did not, right? And have conviction that there's purpose to it. And that was one of the biggest things in my implosion in baseball, was believing there's purpose to it. When I got down to the World Series and I watched Tyler pitch, and my wife's with me, he strikes some guys out, different game, but he comes in, strikes somebody out or something good. And I bear hugged my wife with tears in my eyes. And I looked at her and I said, I thought at that time, I thought the yips was the worst thing that ever happened to me when I was going through it. And at the time it was dark and it sucked. And I would have done anything to not have it. But now I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because having lived the life that I've lived, I'd rather be here watching him pitch in the game than pitch in the game myself. It was fulfilling.
How about that?
The relationships developed in the SEAL teams through those extreme experiences, what I got to experience, the equipment I got to use, that was where I needed to be. I just didn't know it. And I wouldn't trade any of that. I would not go back. If it says, this pill or that pill, and you'll never know, and that, not doing it. Yeah. We're good.
Yeah, I think you might have answered one of my a question I had there, which was, is the mindset when going into whatever battle it may be, especially for the SEALs, is it a rejection of the idea of losing or failure? Is it a total rejection of that, or is it an acceptance of all outcomes that allows you to just do your job?
Well, I guess if we're looking at it as the fear of death, and you were to equate that to the fear of failure,
but as you're saying, that may not be failure.
It's more of a philosophical understanding of, I think, I can't force the outcome in a sense. Now, when I was younger, I'd have been like, whatever. Even as a SEAL, I'd be like, yeah, right, dude. Like, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, if you and I are to compete against each other right now at something, one of us has to win and one of us has to lose. Mm-hmm. So instead of using the fight example this time, we'll use golf. You are probably going to straight up kick my ass at golf because you're good at it and I've hardly played it, right? So, but there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. We can't force the result, only influence it. So as competitors, we want to influence the result to the greatest degree possible, and we do that by demanding perfection of everything within our control. All right, and the sports psychs have told me before as well, it's supposed to be pursuit of perfection of everything within your control. Like, okay, well, you read the books, and ours is based on experience. Okay, demand perfection of everything within your control. Eliminate the variables. And now you're stacking the odds in your favor. So, the fundamentals of action, how you do what you do, the fundamentals of mindset, how you think, and the fundamentals of culture, how you interact with each other, come together to produce best possible outcomes. Can you be invincible? No. I could patrol through a city where there's alleyways, windows, and doors. I can prioritize those threats and which ones I'm going to pay more attention to. I can set myself up in the best position on those streets for angles and play the odds of it all. But at the end of the day, somebody who's untrained could pop out of a space and shoot me in the back. It could happen, But what I can be is hard to kill. I can be very dangerous. So understanding it on that level, yes. Mentally and emotionally, before we go into a mission, no, failure is not an option. We are going to go and we are going to win. Okay? And we're going to leave we're coming hard. And depending on what that mission set looks like in terms of a footprint, it can be what it needs to be. But yeah, if we were to fail, and then we have a way of analyzing that to gain process improvement in our debrief structures.
What would you say, looking back, if you had to grade your career, what would you grade yourself as a SEAL?
Oh man, I don't know that I can answer that. I would, I'd say ask my friends. I think that everything in the SEAL teams is about the team, and if I was considered an asset to the team in a group that I looked up to so much and gave me so much, I got way more out of it than I could ever give. Mm-hmm. And if I have an ounce of respect or was deemed as an asset by those men that I look up to and provided so much for me, then I'd call that a win.
What my last question, just so we have it for the record, what did the on this topic, last question about your career in the SEALs, what does the general public get wrong about that group? What do you see or hear or watch that bothers you?
Let's just say that, you know, we're getting into questions here that are a little bit off of the reason why I share my background.
Sure.
So when I first got out of the SEAL teams, I never told anyone really that that's what I did. A lot of people knew. But I provided as a base for credibility to teach the things that I teach. I learned this stuff, mentally tough, through application. And what combat does is it eliminates the clutter. So it's performance, right? It's human performance. You're competing. It's just the ultimate environment because it involves life and death.
Mm-hmm.
But when bullets start flying, a way of executing action, thinking, or interacting with your teammate is either effective or it's not. All the bureaucracy and the nice sounding phrases and taglines go right out the window. And so through those experiences, me and my colleague that have worked with me have developed this curriculum and this process to help people achieve. And so we're very careful with how we share that background. It is not about us, and it is not about, all it is using those experiences to help other people succeed and trying to do that in alignment with our ethos and core values of the team and remain honor and respect to the guys who've come before us, the guys that are active and the guys that will come after us. But 20 years or so of war and combat, I wasn't in for 20 years, but a decade. And then, that guy was in over 20 years. And you learn a lot of things about leadership, about human performance in a real world environment. And if we can take those and share them in a way that are in that alignment to help other people achieve, especially avoid the mistakes that we made and overcome the yips and all that stuff, because I've been in that hell. That's why it's meaningful to me. I think that's a good thing to do. So I guess without getting into some of the semantics of that question, I would say that know that the guys that are coming out to, most of them are not looking for a massive following or to be publicly known. 98% of them, 99% of them, we have a few that are real loud here and there, and it only takes a few to make a lot of noise. And so I'm very careful with how I go about it, but 98% of them, 99% of them are exactly what they're supposed to be. And they have skill sets, I think, when it comes to performance that can be extremely helpful to other people, whether they go into a business to work for somebody, whether they start their own business, whether they consult on something. They have intangible skills that are very valuable for people.
Yeah, in many ways, it is the highest level of human performance that one can achieve, or at least, at the highest stakes, right? So when did you think or see that avenue for you to create an education around this?
Yeah, it was all by accident. I never had any desire to. Like I said, I'm more reserved in nature. I didn't even have a cell phone for a while. My wife made me get one, and that was for only 2 months or so. But I was asked, people who knew my background in baseball, and even though I didn't play professionally, I still played D1 ball, so high schools around here and stuff, and then knew my background as a SEAL. And then people who understood the kind of the deeper layers there, where it's like, hey man, you've experienced failure, and then you've also achieved some level of success. So tell us about it. How can we apply it to baseball? Some of my buddies, I met some guys who were playing in the big leagues. Michael McHenry, awesome guy, extremely good at these things as well, and he helped me develop a lot of the Yips stuff too. And we've had a lot of conversations, but I met him, and we would go shoot with some guys, Andrew McCutcheon, Garrett Jones, Pedro Alvarez. And as we'd be at the range, they would just ask me questions. So even though I didn't play in the big leagues, I could speak the language, having played D1 baseball. And so, hey, when the cameras are on in the crowd in Yankee Stadium, and I feel it, I feel like I can't, how do I focus? So I would take things I learned in combat and just start putting it into words, kind of raw, and figuring it out, and then traveling around and working with teams. I applied for jobs, and I kept getting turned down. So I was running out of money. I put 10 grand on a credit card to fund my business. And this little team, there's a team called Knock High School Baseball up in Pennsylvania. A little bit rural, north of Pittsburgh, and tough kids. And the coach called me after a couple of them had gotten in a fight or something, and I went up there and I worked with them. It's like the third or fourth time I'd ever worked with a team. Drove a trailer with logs and tires and sandbags. Buddy met me down there, and we just got after it with these kids. Taught them teamwork, taught them toughness, taught them all the things. They had never won more than a playoff game in the history of the school, and they won the state championship that year. So as I'm tracking the score, they win. You know, they were tied, and I lose the feed, and my wife's driving, and she gets somewhere, and I get the feedback, and they won. And I just, you know, kind of started breaking down a little bit. She's like, no matter what you have, this is what you do. For whatever it takes from this point forward, this is what you're going to do with your life. And so from there, we started rolling, man, and teams started winning, and, you know, it just, from the high schools to the colleges to wherever, and just very naturally built my way into here we are.
Yeah. And so where did the 14 fundamentals of winning come from? Is that your sort of checklist? Or?
Yeah. A buddy of mine called and asked if I would talk to the Vanderbilt football team. That was the first time I ever spoke to a team. That was before that Pennsylvania team. And I sat in a room and I thought, okay, what is it that makes us successful? I wanted to provide them. Anyone can come in and motivate you, tell you an exciting war story,
right,
tell you to work together as a team because that's how we do it in combat. Well, yeah, no kidding. You have to rely on each other to survive. So, but how does that, you know, apply here? So I wanted to honor the differences in the environment. I wanted to provide them something that they could use on the field. And that was the only way that it would justify utilizing my background and sharing it, was I am going to help you be better at what you do, utilizing those experiences. And, you know, and that's really fulfilling as well when they do go succeed. And I wrote 5 of them down. And at the top of my paper, I said, what am I going to call these? And I was like, the fundamentals of winning. And I wrote it on the top of that paper. Still got it in my drawer at home. Over 10 years now, that was 10 years ago, well, 9.5, I've developed it into the 14. And it's been a little more, a little less. I've got it where it is now, where I want it.
Can I ask you about a few of them?
Sure.
What is toughness? You've answered it a couple different ways, but like, what is the definition that you came up with?
So I separate mental toughness and toughness. Toughness to me, I believe, is an ability to take pain. Okay, it's not pushing people around when you know you can win and you're bigger, stronger, and faster. It's an ability to take pain. I stole this from a podcast. I don't remember exactly which one. Again, I think it was a Jordan Peterson podcast, but it's we suffer well to grow in character. Growth in character makes us more capable. More capable people can achieve more. And then I'll add this in. I think through that achievement, the lessons learned along the way and what we're able to produce in it, we can help other people. And that's what provides fulfillment in our lives. We had a saying in the SEAL teams, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The first part's literally true. The second part isn't, but how we suffer is. And that's what that is saying, is like, hey, man, you got a choice here. And you can sit there all day long. Everybody's going to suffer. That's a part of life. You can sit there all day long and you can focus on whose fault it is with that victimhood mentality of helplessness and self-loathing. But where is it going to take you? Nowhere. That's why it has no value.
Yeah.
Right? People who achieve understand their experiences are unique to anyone else's. And it's, what am I going to do about that? All right. And what am I going to make of it? And believe that there's purpose to it.
Yeah.
You know?
I heard Stephen Colbert say that. I saw an Instagram clip of him say that he's most thankful for the things that he wished most wouldn't have happened.
Sure.
Because existing is a gift, and existing is the gift, but to exist means to suffer. So if you follow that logic, then to suffer is a gift.
So my dad, I was 12. I was pitching against a team I hated, our rival team, next city over, and they beat us every year. We never beat them a single time in the 4 years we played them. And I struck out 2 guys, walked the bases loaded, walked in a run. I was throwing pitches over the plate. The umpire had a kid on the other team, or some sort of relationship.
Seems like a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I know, right? And it became very apparent that what was happening. So my dad calls timeout. I'm walking off the mound. I'm starting to cry, holding up the ball. But he grabs me by the shirt and he shoves me back on top of the rubber, and he's pissed. I'm like, Dad, why are you pissed? Like, I know he's hard on me, but in a good way. He passed away this summer. And, but he I was like, man, you should have my back this time. Like this one's really not fair. This one's not my fault, Dad, And he looked at me and he said, hey, man, what do you want me to do? Everybody in the ballpark knows what's going on. This guy's full of it. Everybody knows it. But I have no control over that, and neither do you. And if I put in somebody else, they're going to have to come in and deal with the same problem. And you're the best pitcher on the team. And it wasn't daddy ball. I was. Everybody wanted me up there. He's like, your buddy's going to have to come in and deal with the same problem. So do you want to go in the dugout and cry, or do you want to pitch? I was like, I want to pitch. He said, good. Then stop crying and figure out a way to get people out. And you see, if I go into the dugout and cry, I'm still going to suffer. Mm-hmm. It's still hard. You have to choose your hard, right? I forget who coined that phrase, but choose your hard. And that's still a hard day, but all it does is grow bitterness and resentment. I'm going to complain, and rightfully so, complain and blame the umpire. But where does it get me? Nowhere. If I stay on the mound in defiance, one, I hold him more accountable by simply doing the right thing and exposing it, and my ability to control my emotions and focus and courage and toughness grow. And so what makes toughness virtuous is when you take pain for someone else, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. What does understand sources of confidence mean?
So
where does confidence come from?
Yeah, I do an hour-long session on this with guys typically, but I think I'm going to do a 2-minute or less, a 2-minute drill here on it. But I think confidence is certainty. It's when we feel certain in our ability to produce, and that certainty is when we feel relaxed but focused with a controlled aggression. And if we can get there, we increase our odds of success. So our certainty comes from where we place our trust or what we value most. And we tend to place our trust as humans naturally in critics, what other people think and say about us, and we allow them to imprison what we believe we're capable of accomplishing. And we place our trust in the low odds of accomplishing a difficult task. So if I placed all my value in the people who said, hey, you're not going to make it through SEAL training because you imploded in baseball due to a mental problem, right? And if I placed all my trust in, hey, 135 of you guys are going to start, 20 are going to be left after Hell Week, then I would have never even started. And, but I think that everybody is born with the ability to accomplish something great that's in alignment with their passion and interest, something that's meaningful to them, and there's purpose to everyone's life. And people will give you 1,000 reasons why you can't do something. Winners find an excuse to win. They just need one. And the low odds, those are not defining characteristics of our capability. They are natural properties of difficult tasks. Anything hard is going to attract critics and low odds. That's what makes them special, worthy of pursuit, and rewarding when we overcome. It's overcoming the struggle that creates the reward. So we want to earn trust in our preparation, attention to detail, and relentless effort in each other. If you have the opportunity to select who your team is, you want to start with high character. That's why we have Hell Week. They break you down until you're emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. You think you're dying at some point, and the guy that can reach down and find more and help the guy next to him, that's what they're looking for. We never sacrifice character for talent. Talent's worthless if it drops its gun and runs away, and character's priceless when it's time to hold the line. We can teach anyone how to shoot, So, and then conviction and purpose. So you could have perfect preparation and you could have flawless character of people on your team. Not really, but if you could, it still doesn't guarantee the outcome, because the outcome of the event is in the future, which naturally makes it uncertain. So how do we have certainty in an uncertain outcome? The only way I've found to answer that is we can't be certain what the outcome will be, but we can be certain there's purpose to every outcome or value to be gained from it. That short-term failures are necessary to produce long-term success. Now that takes an element of faith, but it's not blind faith. It's by clear observation, by all the examples I just provided. You look at Matsek's story, Glover's story, my story, your own story probably, right? All of Michael Jordan's story, you name it. Right? There was that, and then there was the other thing. You had to believe there was purpose to it and allow it to motivate you. That doesn't mean we become apathetic and we just rely on hope. Hope is a beggar. We got to be on a warpath and go hunt it down, because God helps those who helps themselves. But I think that if we're doing all of that, I do know this. Even though my life went in a direction I didn't know it was going to go, if we do the right things work out. Even if you don't know exactly where you're going. So
faith and confidence kind of maybe go hand in hand?
At least in terms of prior to competing, yeah. I think so. So that's how I go through confidence. There's other thing we do, high pressure, composure to bring it back down, all sorts of stuff. But that's how I would go through confidence.
We can't give them all 14 because you got to talk to Stonewall Solutions, stonewallsolutions.com. You got to call Jason for all 14 of these. But one thing I did want to get, rule number 13 was failure analyzing, which I think is big for golfers. Is there What are some practical ways that we can analyze our failures a little bit better?
Yeah, think through fundamental inconsistencies. So what is it that's within my control that I can adjust? So I'm shooting on the range one day. We're doing some like speed shooting. This one I was pretty good, and my buddies are beating me and they're giving me a hard time. And I was just head to toe analysis, what's going on. I realized my left foot was a little more open, causing my natural point of aim to be a bit off. And my pinky was kind of resting on the grip of the gun rather than pressing into it like I normally would. Clean those two things up, started getting rounds back on target quickly, and whatever, rather than kicking over the water cooler, feeling sorry for myself, getting in a fight with somebody or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is weaknesses. Identify weakness. That's an uncontrollable disadvantage, some sort of power our opponent may have that we do not. Perhaps they drive the ball further than you do, and you're just not going to catch up with that day because they have more power. And I think maximum focus plus maximum effort create maximum amount of opportunity. And when that opportunity arises, attack it to force pressure upon your opponent. And if they're not mentally strong like you will, they will go from that proactive nature of attempting to win to that reactive nature of trying to not lose. And that's going to make them more susceptible to mistakes. But you want to create it upon them through what you're applying, right? And I've got stories and stories and stories of how I've seen that play out. You may get beat every one or maybe barely hanging in there, and then the next thing, boom, man, one play in football, one pitch in baseball, one shot in golf, and the whole thing switches. The momentum completely changes. And then the last thing, the most important one, high achievers do this, and my dad told me, don't be your own worst enemy one day. And it was like, that was really profound because, for me, it was more, it wasn't like that all the time, but it was so, forgive yourself. Eyes up, next target. It's put it away. Everybody fails, so you're not the first one. But when you have that analyzation process and a way to go back and sharpen the blades of your sword or create new weapons, have something. And you got to look forward, because if you remain in the past, that last shot and that, or my last round, you're going to stay there in that guilt and frustration and everything else. Until you look forward, then you'll start feeling a chance for redemption, aggression, defiance, all the things you need to compete well. Right?
Yes, well said. I am going to have to listen back to this interview multiple times because there's a lot of great information in here. How far along do you think how much more is there to add to the theories that you're putting together, especially as it relates to golf? I mean, I know that you mentioned earlier that this is a process. This is a rehabilitation process to get people back to where they want to be. How much more information is there, do you think, to be discovered on this topic?
The Yips is a rehabilitation process, for sure.
Yes.
And on the mental side, too, I tell people, if you really want to gain knowledge here, I can come give you a keynote, but a speech is a speech, and you forget half of it when you walk out. The best way is like weight room training, periodized gains over time. And so we train a little bit and a little bit and a little bit till you've mastered the knowledge. And unlike sports psychology, I don't try to keep you around as a client for the rest of your life. I train you up to get to where you need to be, and then hopefully you pass me on to someone else because I just did a hell of a job for you and you're kicking ass, right? That's the whole point of it. So the other thing is, on the Yips side, I've been holding off on the book because I wasn't sure what the answer to your question was on that. And I think right now the foundation is there to where I'm going to go ahead and start working. Because as I worked with players, I would think of more things. I would find different ways of delivering it, different ways of saying it, develop new methods in the back and forth, tweak it a little here and there. And it's as good as it's ever been right now. And I think that it's pretty stable, and it's probably start time to get some of this into print to help people out.
Very, very exciting. I will read that. Please send me a copy.
Thanks.
If when you do it, or I'll publish it. I'll leave you with this, and thank you for the time. Lots of time today. But if you had the ability, knowing what you know now, to sit down and talk to the 21-year-old Jason, where would you start with him?
Man, that's a tough question. Because there's not a lot I would change. There's things I could have done differently to avoid the problems that I would have had, but that's how I learned them. And then that's turned into everything else. So I really don't know how I would answer that question. And people answer it, I've gotten that question at least once in the last week, but I would probably say, just in general, no matter what happens around you, if I could tell you more of the depth of my personal story, what I actually experienced in college and everything from, whatever it was. But, be grounded in that ego. I was reading something in the Bible that said, true love drives out all fear. And I couldn't understand. I was like, how does that mean? I can love and I can still be afraid and whatever. And I started thinking about the ego. I was talking to a friend of mine when I was having some of the struggles that special operators have sometimes. And I found myself, I really looked up to this guy. I mean, he's accomplished all the things at the highest levels you can get to, not in terms of officers. I mean, in like warfighting capabilities. Guy's very well revered in the teams. And I was talking to him and I found myself starting to tell him a story. And I thought to myself, why am I telling him this story? And the answer was because I wanted his approval. You know what I mean? And it's like, dude, I already had it. He's asking me to come speak at his retirement. Like, what else do you need? And so I caught myself there, and that's the ego in play.
Yeah.
Right? So I thought about that, and I thought, the ego can be in terms of arrogance. And I saw some guys at Buds like that. They wanted to go home and tell people at the bar they were Navy SEALs, and then they couldn't get through the weak moments, and they quit. Not all quitters are that way, but there's some really good dudes that just don't make it. But he was. But for most of us, it's the other way. It's that constant need of affirmation and validation. And that's what I would have, if I could have had a better understanding of that when I was younger, because I think that's what it truly means to be reborn. And you got to have an ego, but in a sense, let the ego die and be grounded in the truth of who you are, knowing who you are, what you want, why you want it. Then and only then can you truly love others. And then they have no power over you, and you're not afraid.
Ego's a hell of a thing.
It is.
It's a hell of a drug. Maybe we'll do another podcast on ego. But thank you, Jason, for the time and the knowledge, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you guys, man. I appreciate it. It was awesome to be here with you.
Thanks, bud.